Well, good morning and a very warm welcome back to another week on my allotment. A special warm welcome to those who've just joined the channel. And again, as always, a busy week for me. Those of you who are a little more observant and have been with me a bit longer may recognise I've changed the van. Spent a day van hunting yesterday in Bristol, and it was more difficult than I thought. It's a bad time to buy a van because of all the lockdowns and the supply chain issues. Vans are in high demand, prices have gone up. You can't buy a brand new van at the moment, there's a very long waiting list. So second-hand van prices have gone up. Anyway, it's all very difficult, as life always tends to be. But we found a place in Bristol that had hundreds of vans. Anyway, long story short, we did a Part X. I got a good price for my old van. My old van didn't owe me a penny. It really did serve me well, but its days were numbered, and I've now got a much newer van, so very happy. Anyway, moving on from that, so I've got another day up the plot. But I thought I'd start with a little bit of a look at what my family got up to when we had our week down on Dartmoor. I mentioned before that one of my customers, I've got an itchy nose, excuse me. Yeah, one of my customers very kindly offered me the use of her a cottage on Dartmoor at a place called Bovey Castle. So we kindly accepted her generous offer. And we had a fantastic week. You may be able to hear the rain. Well, apart from the first couple of days, we didn't have a great deal of that, thankfully, and we had a lovely week. It was especially nice to have my parents with us and give them a break from their home. And yeah, we had a wonderful time. So I'll show a few clips of that now, and then we'll talk about something else. Welcome to Bovey Castle Hotel and Championship Golf Course. And this is the Manor Court cottages, converted out of the old stable building where we're staying. Stunning. Wow. Evening one,
Bread and butter, we've got enough of it.
takeaway fish and chips.
There's more peas there.
Cheers everyone.
Cheers.
Yeah, cheers. Welcome to the garden house near Yelverton. We found a chocolate stall. Tastes fantastic. stand put on that one and stand still.
It's not slippy, you okay?
And then when Carl's ready, listen to
He'll pull
him.
you over. Oh, thank you.
Lunch break. Where are we, Charlotte? Now that is a flapjack. Thank you. And this is our view. Perfectly placed pub just before Walk's End.
Oh, it's a statue. Oh, for goodness sake, I thought it was this.
He doesn't even have a
He
golf
wasn't
club
when
in
he
his hand.
first went there. Welcome to Widdicombe in the Moor. Just banged my head on the shed door. I don't know how many times I've got to do that before I realise that I'm taller than the entrance to the shed. Anyway, in the rather miserable gloom and rain, which is linked actually, I've made another excellent carpentry job. I'm dismantling the little covered area that looks out over the pond. I don't use it anymore. I made it when I only had the one shed so that I had somewhere to sit out the rain. And of course I don't have to do that now because I've got this. So I took the plastic sheet that I had on the side of that and I've made a door here. it doesn't matter so much in the summer, but in the winter, the wind and rain howl through this gap and spread the you know, although this is, I'm sheltered from the rain under here, it just comes in through sideways. I think, you know, I mean, we'll see how long that lasts, and I'll tend to keep it closed because when I open it, it opens and the wind would whack it round. But anyway, it's an attempt to make it a little bit cosier, drier and more comfortable under this plastic roof, and I'm quite pleased with it. So, something else I'm pleased with on the plot. I know the light's not very good under here, and I apologise for being in the dark. Maybe that's better. Anyway, I've had this allotment 5 years now, and when I first started, the perceived wisdom that I was given was that every year you should try something new. And we did. We tried a few fruits and or vegetables, particularly like kohlrabi. That's one that comes to mind, that we just didn't like, didn't have a use for. Celeriac was another. So I sort of put that to one side and thought, okay, that works for others. It doesn't really work for Cheryl and I. Cheryl and I know exactly what we like. We grow it on the plot, and we're happy to stick with it. It's really rather conventional, but it suits us. However, maybe that perceived wisdom is not such a bad thing, because this year I've tried something different and it's been a 100% success, and that is winter squash mashed potato. I saw the packet, the seed packet, on a rack somewhere, or it might actually have been Kitchen Garden magazine. I can't remember where, but it said that, you know, you use this squash as mashed potato and it tastes just like mashed potato. Well, I remained to be convinced, but I thought we'd give it a go. We use a lot of butternuts, and I thought, you know, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So I've got about 10 plants on the plot, and I'll show you what I've got off just one plant in a second. But I've had to harvest one of, or get rid of one of the plants to empty a bed. So we took one home, and let's see what I did with it. So this is winter squash mashed potato, cut in half. The seeds have been scooped out, smeared liberally with olive oil, and cooked at what temperature for how long, Cheryl?
About 200 for 3/4 of an hour.
Right.
Just slightly more.
Of course, the all-important taste test.
Tastes like mashed potato.
That is really amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mashed potato in its own container.
There's a bit of salt and pepper on it.
Okay, we can do that. Very good. So we really could not be more pleased with this winter squash. And actually, this what I've got here, 17, and of course we took one home, so that's 18 butternuts or squashes. Actually, it was 2 plants. So 18 winter squash mashed potato off of 2 plants. And I've got about another, I don't know, 7 or 8 plants in another bed yet to harvest. And okay, the one there is a little bit small, not going to get a lot of mashed potato out of that, but it's a really good supplement to your potato harvest, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. Absolutely, I couldn't believe how like mashed potato it tastes. I actually said to Cheryl when we were in the kitchen, if you shut your eyes and tasted that, I defy anyone to think that is not mashed potato. The texture, the taste, all of it was just as if it was. Fantastic. Oh well, I know it was going to be an overcast day, but I wasn't expecting it to be raining hard. Anyway, can't do much about that. So what am I doing today? Well, I have instructions from Cheryl to bring home some potatoes, proper potatoes. So I'm going to dig out a couple more tubs. They're Sarpomera, the main crops. And then, you know, interspersed with coming in and drying off in front of the fire. I mean, it's not really cold enough yet for a fire, but I've got the wood. I've got lots of wood. So I might as well enjoy it. It's blooming lovely and warm in there. So yeah, interspersed with getting in out the rain and getting comfortable again, I'm going to slowly continue with clearing the beds. The perpetual spinach, that's been fantastic this year, and we've frozen a lot of it in the ice cube trays, so they're all ready for the winter when we do our smoothies. So I think that can come out today. The celery, which has been the most successful I've ever had, but it is now all bolted, so that's got to come out. And so there'll be lots more clearing of the beds, putting it into the spare compost bay, and then chopping it up with the shears and carrying on the process of improving the compost heaps. At some point, don't know whether that will be today, I'm going to collect some runner bean seeds for next year. The runner bean I've grown this year, I've mentioned it before, is called St George. Far and away the nicest tasting runner bean I've ever had. So I know my mum and dad want some seeds, so I might just pull the pods off and bring them in here in the dry and take the seeds out. So yeah, it's really just routine, closing down the two plots ready for winter. Having said that, back at home in the greenhouse I've got garlic and broad beans, aquadulce broad beans, which are a specific autumn sown broad bean. They've been sown in pots in the greenhouse. Nothing's come up yet, but we shall see. I have got some onions in the ground actually. I did that last week, so it's not complete closure. I am already looking forward to next year and starting the process off of those things that I can get going. But yeah, today is just really routine, pulling stuff off tripods and frames, and yeah, not very interesting stuff, so you probably won't see a great deal of that, but I thought I'd tell you a few tales of my gardening career. I've bored you all with my ditties about the army life, but the gardening is as interesting in its own way, and it's usually just to do with how you interact with other people. Other people are fascinating. So yeah, I'll tell you a few tales about that. Well, before I tell you these, I think there's three sort of little tales of my interactions with customers. I should start off by saying that because I spent, from being a schoolboy, when I left school, I joined the army, and I had I've said many times, I had a 30-year full military career. You don't come across the public that often, and you certainly aren't embedded within the public. You know, you live in separate areas amongst your peers, young, fit, healthy people. You occasionally meet the public on open days, and you know, when I was a bomb disposal officer, I'd meet the public when I went to deal with something. But you know, they're very limited snapshots. So when I left the army and we moved back to Chepstow, and I started up as a self-employed gardener, for the first time in my life, I was alongside normal people. And I would start this by saying that my experience is that 95% of people are decent, nice, thoughtful, honest people. The vast majority of the interactions I've had with the public have been good, pleasant and rewarding. That said, occasionally you come across an oddball, and I'm sure you can all relate to that in your own lives. So starting with, these are really small stories. There's nothing, you're not going to learn anything big today. But one lesson I learned very early on, as I was working as a gardener, and I took on any work I could get, anywhere I could get it. I was working on a lady's patio one day, just weeding between the slabs. Very mundane work, but it pays. And she came out and she came right up to me like this with a cup of tea or coffee, and I said, "Oh, thank you very much." That was my first mistake. She said rather indignantly, "It's not for you." "Oh, sorry," I said, and I carried on working. And she proceeded to talk to me for the next 5 or 10 minutes about whatever. You think she might have said, "Oh, would you like one?" But she didn't. That was me being presumptuous. She stood there and drank her brew, chatted to me, and then went back inside. So I learnt a lesson that day. Keep your mouth shut, Martin. Actually, I've learnt that a lot in life. If she's going to give you a brew, she'll ask you what you want, won't she? So that was one of my little minor lessons as I carved a career as a gardener. I could bore you senseless with all the, the cock-ups of what I got wrong, because, I had no qualifications. What I did is I had a little form next to the phone, and when people rang up, one lady rang me up and said, "I'd like you to come and cut my photinia hedge. Can you do that?" And I said, "Yeah, of course I can." Put the phone down after we'd arranged a time and a day. Straight on the internet, what the hell's a photinia? So I learned, I did it on the internet, and then I went along to the garden and it was no problem. The problem always occurred when you're stood in their garden and they say, "Would you mind just going down the garden and cutting the forsythia back?" 11 years on, I know all these things now, but when I started, and I decided my best policy was, and when I started, Cheryl said, "You don't know anything about gardening. How are you going to make a living out of gardening when you've never had a garden of your own?" I said, "Look, my assumption is, and it turned out to be correct, is that people don't want Alan Titchmarsh or Monty Don. They want somebody who's honest, hard-working, who does a decent day's work for an honest day's pay, and they want reliability and trustworthiness. Well, I can do all that, and the gardening I'll learn on the job." And that's exactly how it turned out to be. The number of times I went along to give a quote and they said, "Well, we had a gardener, but he never turns up." I don't understand that. My customers can set their watch and their calendar by me to the minute. So that was an experience. Don't presume that they're bringing you out a brew. Wait and be asked. Another time I worked for a chap. He worked for the church. I have to say, not being a religious man myself, I've had some odd interactions with vicars and people who work within the church. They're not always as charitable as the church may appear. But this chap worked for the church. He was extremely religious. That's not really got anything to do with the story. I've just learned that you can make certain assumptions about people based on who they work for. Anyway, he wanted 2 hours work every week. And he wouldn't come out and talk to me. He'd wave to me from the window and I appeared in his garden. But he wouldn't come out because he was very conscious that would eat into the minutes he was paying for. And he wanted a tree stump removing from his back garden. He couldn't get any machinery in. There was no scope for that. And he said, "Look, could you do it by hand?" And it would be, hours of work, hard work, back-breaking work. But I said, "Look, if you're happy to pay me, it's going to take a few hours, a few visits. But yeah, I can do that." So I set about it this particular sunny, hot day, and as I was wielding the pickaxe or the mattock, I was dripping in sweat. It was hard labour, and I could hear my breathing wheezing. So I took a couple of minutes break. I sat on the tree stump. I need both hands for this. Yeah, I sat on the tree stump just catching my breath, wiping the sweat off my face before I went again. And he tapped on the kitchen window to get my attention and went like that. You cheeky, you know. Anyway, I did my couple of hours work, and then I said to him, look, I will get this tree stump out for you because I've committed to it, but I shan't be coming back after that. You know, that's unacceptable. You know, I was taking a minute's break. It was rude, absolutely rude. I mean, he could not have been more apologetic, but I never went back to him. Another little example of, and this has only happened the once. They happen to be Chinese. Again, I'm not sure that's relevant, but they were, and there was a language issue, so that's why I mention it. As they had, you know, a local Chinese restaurant. And as tends to be my experience, limited as it is, the older generation don't speak English, but the younger generation speak perfect English, because basically they're English, aren't they? Born and bred. So I was working at a customer's garden, and the chap from next door, a young fella, came across and said, would you come and give us a quote for our tree? So I went, and he wanted us a little bit of pruning done on this very large tree, and I quoted him £50. And he spoke to his dad in Chinese, and they had a bit of an interaction, and he said, no, it's too much. Cheaper. I said, no, I don't negotiate, I don't haggle, that's my price. If it's too much, you get somebody else. And I went back to the garden and carried on working. 20 minutes later or something, the young fella came over again. He said, okay, I've spoke to my father again, and we're happy with the price, £50. And we arranged a time and a date, and I came back, and I did the job. And I knocked on the door, and he handed me the money. Now, I never count money in front of customers, you know. And in the 11 years that I've been working as a self-employed gardener, apart from the incident I'm speaking about, one chap had to pay me £300. He paid me in cash, and when I got home, it was £290. And I genuinely believe that was an honest error. That's it. In 11 years, nobody has tried to fleece me. But this, I just knew when he handed me the money, it was light. So I sort of found it out, and there was £30 there. And I said, I think we agreed £50. He said, no, 30. And he went to shut the door on me. And I shouldn't have done it, but I couldn't help myself. It was an instinctive reaction. I put my foot in the door, and I moved in really close to him, and I said, I think you'll find that we agreed 50, and I want my money. And there was lots of yap, and I got an extra 20 quid. That was unpleasant and uncalled for. I mean, you know, for crying out loud, over 20 quid. Anyway, I shouldn't have done what I did, but then neither should they. So that was another experience. Funny enough, about a year later, the older fella who didn't speak any English, I was doing the gutters of the customer next door, and he came over and intimated by sign language that he wanted me to do his gutters. And I intimated back to him that I wouldn't do it. So, yeah. And then the most interesting one of all, I got a phone call when I was working one day from a chap who I didn't meet, never did meet him. But he was a dentist, and he'd left. He lived in a little village just outside of Chepstow, and he had a very expensive property, and he'd had a new garden done. I think the landscaping cost him £14,000, and he was now in Jersey setting up a new dental practice, and he wanted his garden maintained. He was selling the house for £850,000, and he said, I've had you recommended to me, would you go and have a look at the garden, give me a price for routine weekly maintenance until it sells? So I went up and I looked at it, and it was a big old garden, lots of work to do. So I gave him a price, and he accepted it, and he said he took my bank details and he would pay me in the bank every month. 3 months later, no money. So I had his email address, so I emailed him. I said, a polite reminder, you owe me such and such. And it was quite a considerable sum of money. Anyway, he emailed me back, and I'll never forget it. I should have saved the email. I'm setting up a new dental practice in Jersey. I'm also moving house and organising the holiday of a lifetime. Never did find out where that was. And then in the bottom, in bold, please do not bother me about your money again. Well, it's not repeatable what I thought. However, my last job in the army was as the inspector of diving for all army diving teams. So I went round the world and the country with my two fellas inspecting and requalifying army dive teams. And we have a TA diving team in Jersey, by coincidence. Now, I had no idea where this fella's dental practice was. I guessed St Helier, but I didn't know. And I spoke to the biggest bloke I knew in the team out there and said, look, this is the situation. He owes me so much. Do you think you could go and find him and get my money for me? And there's a few drinks in it for you. He said, leave it with me. A couple of weeks later, I got a cheque in the post. And I contacted this fella and said, oh, thanks very much, mate. I really appreciate that. That was a hell of a sum of money. I'm really glad I've, not been fleeced. And I spoke to him about the situation, and sure enough, the bloke had set up he was an Eastern European. I've got nothing against foreigners. It just so happens that 2 of these 3 stories happen to be about foreigners. Yeah, he was an Eastern European, and he was setting up a new dental practice. Turns out he had some lawsuits against him from dental malpractice in Chepstow, and he'd done a quick runner. That's wrong, isn't it, that he can then go and do the same in somewhere else. Anyway, he found his dental practice, and it had just been set up, and he walked into the reception, said to the lady, I'm looking for a Mr. I won't say his name. And she said, oh, he's in whatever, surgery room, whatever. He'll be out in 15 minutes. He said, oh, don't worry, I'll go and see him. I mean, this bloke makes me look tiny. He's huge. And he walked into the surgery, and there's this fella leaning over a bloke who's... and he says, I'm here from Mr. Jordan, a gardener you owe so much money to, and I'd like a cheque now, please. And he said he couldn't write that cheque quick enough. And he sent, and my mate sent it to me in the post. And all was good with the world. And I wrote a cheque and sent it back to this fellow who did my debt collecting for me to say thank you. And he said, if you ever need any more debt collecting doing, I'm your man. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, there's only a certain number of people or type of people that would do that. But the end of the story is that I sent an email back to this chap saying, I'm a busy gardener, my time is valuable, I can't chase money. And then in bold at the bottom, please do not bother me about your garden again. That was a moment of sweet, sweet revenge. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. Anyway, like I say, in my vast experience of gardening over 11 years now, they are very exceptional. In fact, they really are it regarding getting money. Anyway, I thought you might enjoy those. Well, I'm well into my working day. Managed to achieve quite a bit, very happy with the way it's going. So much to do. So much mess to clear up. But, I've got all winter, so I am doing my very best. It is a weakness of mine that I feel the need to get it all done as soon as physically possible. And I'm trying my best to keep calm, relax, knowing I've got plenty of time to get all these weeds out and all the mess cleared up. just how fickle has the weather been this year. This runner bean St George, I'm thinking about when I'm going to clear it all away and get it on the compost heap, and it's still flowering. Likewise the strawberries, flowering and fruit on them, even though the slugs are having a field day. Well, I can't deny it's a lot of work, but that whole compost bay is now full of chopped, finely chopped, decomposing material. I think I'll leave it till the new year before I turn it, and then we'll see how it's getting on. But I can't get any more in there now. Well, it's that time again when I'm thinking about going home. And I've got plenty to do when I get home, because the new van needs customising in the back to how I have my tools on, on the side walls, on hooks and racks and so on. So that's all got to be sort of customised. It's a fairly simple job with screws and hooks, but it makes my working day a lot easier if I can identify where each tool goes, and if one's missing, I know it's still in the garden somewhere. So I've got plenty to do there. A good day on the plot. It's dried up nicely and been quite sunny at times. And most importantly, everything I bought as an autumn crop. So I bought broad beans, garlic, and then several different kinds of onion sets. They are all now either in the greenhouse, in the ground, or in cell trays in the cold frames. So that's everything for now sorted, and the rest is cosmetic: clearing up, tidying up, hoeing, weeding, the usual mundane housekeeping that is necessary in the autumn. So I hope you found the gardening stories, as as minor as they are, slightly interesting. And all being well, I shall be around next week, I think. So thanks for subscribing. Please give me a thumbs up if you can, and well done if you got this far. And all being well, I shall see you again next week. Look after yourselves, take care, and bye for now.